Hi, this is Nevin Williams. I am a mortgage loan officer and I'm also a real estate investor. And today, what I want to talk to you about are appraisals. So a lot of people may not realize, first-time home buyers, that before a loan can be approved, in most cases, there are a few cases where it's not required, but that's not going to be this video. An appraisal is required, and an appraisal consists of a licensed appraiser going to a property. And if it's a full appraisal, they have to measure the rooms, the exterior of the property. They have to take pictures of the interior and the exterior. And then they take that data and they go back and they start doing calculations. They look for other properties that are very similar to the property they just appraised as far as size, location, that have sold within the last 6 months. And basically what they're looking for is they're looking for comparable sales. And comparable sales just means these are houses that are similar to the subject property that aren't far away and have sold recently. So for example, if you have a property that, let's say, sold 2 years ago, that's not going to be a good comparable. But if you had a property that sold 60 days ago and it's about close to the same square footage and it's not far away from where the property is located, then that's going to be a good comp. Now, there's some other things that you have to consider. So, for example, in some metro areas or some other areas, you may have a river or some type of a boundary that completely changes a neighborhood. So even though you have similar square footage, the amenities are immensely different. So, for example, let's say that, excuse me, on the south side of a river, those properties are 2,000 square feet. But those properties all have lake views or river views, and maybe they have, I don't know, let's say tennis courts, just making something up. And then on the north side of the river, they don't have water views and they don't have tennis courts, but it's the same square footage. Those amenities are going to impact the value somewhat. And it's not so much that an appraiser looks at it and says, well, the tennis courts add $10,000 value to the property. That's not how they appraise. It's based on people's desire to live in that area. They're willing to pay more money for those homes. So when you look at homes maybe on the south side of the river that has all the amenities, those may go for a higher cost per square foot than the ones on the north side that don't have the amenities because people pay for amenities. So just understand, I think there's a big misunderstanding about appraisers and what they look at to value properties. And they don't necessarily look at a deck and say, well, you spent $10,000 on a deck, therefore your property is worth $10,000 more. Or a common sales pitch that I hear from contractors, I'm just going to use solar as an example, but it could be multiple contractors, landscaping, whatever. They come out and they go, oh, you'll improve your property value. Well, maybe not. It's not a direct impact on the property value, right? They're not going to say, oh, you have solar panels, your house is worth 10 grand more. But they might find other homes that have solar panels that sold for more money because for whatever reason that was considered something that the home buyer wanted. So just understand, it's not a direct correlation. It all comes down to what people are willing to pay for that property, for the size, for the site, and for the amenities. So let's go through an appraisal report. I'd like for you to just kind of get an idea of all the information and data that goes into a URAR, that's Uniform Residential Appraisal Report. They've got different form numbers, but they all look the same. So give me a second here. So here we have an actual appraisal, and some things were changed on it for privacy reasons. But basically, this is the layout. This is what it looks like. And if you look in these left column right here, it shows subject, meaning that's the property that's being appraised. Then there's information about the contract, the neighborhood. So keep an eye on the left side. That'll tell you what it is. Then it gives you descriptions, right? It gives you the property address, the buyer, the seller, the assessor's parcel number, any special assessments. In this case, there's HOA dues, $630. Whoops, sorry about that. Per year. Fee simple means that it's owned, not leasehold, which is renting. It's a purchase transaction, and it gives the name and address of the lender. Then they want to know if the property has been offered for sale in the past 12 months prior to the effective date of this appraisal. And the reason that matters is that some mortgage loans, like a cash out refinance, for example, if a property was listed and then taken off the market, a lot of times you cannot do a cash out refinance until 6 months has passed, because it might be an indication of somebody who's struggling financially. And if they can't get the property sold, then they may be desperate and just trying to get cash out to be able to make their payments. And because of that risk, a lot of loans and lenders will not allow a cash out refi until some time has passed. So that's why they ask a non-arm's length sale. This is important. A non-arm's length sale means that the buyer and the seller have some type of relationship. It's either family members or they work at the same company, something of that nature. And the reason they do that is it lets the underwriter know that they need to take a closer look to make sure that the seller's not giving, concessions in order to sell the property that's outside of the normal scope of what you would normally run into. Basically trying to help the buyer get approved for a loan where they otherwise wouldn't be approved. Then you break it down, neighborhood composition, lets you know the trends, the characteristics, the price and age of one unit housing in that area, where it's located and what the neighborhood looks like. Then it breaks down the site, its public utilities, and there's no private road. If there was a private road right over here, then typically lenders want a private road maintenance agreement to verify who's taking care of the road. General description, it's it's a one unit. The attic's a drop stair, the type of foundation, exterior walls, the interior driveway. And the appraiser verified that all utilities were on and operational at time of inspection. This is especially important if it's a government insured loan, because the appraiser has to verify that everything's in working order. Then you get here and you have comparables. So the one in the left column is a subject property. And if you look at the left, it tells you exactly what it is. Value adjustments, sales or financing concessions, the date and time of the sale, was it a leasehold or was it owner occupied like fee simple? How many room count, what's the square footage, did it have a deck, carport, garage, fireplaces, pools, things of that nature. Comparable sale number one, it shows the distance, which is important. It shows the purchase price, the cost per square foot, and then any adjustments, which there were adjustments because this property had less rooms than the subject property, even though the square footage was pretty close. Comparable two, same thing, but again, this one had less room count than the subject, so there's an adjustment. And then number three, same thing. And then down at the bottom here, you'll see the net gross adjustment. That's after they took all of these things into consideration, comparing it to the subject property. Then the appraiser pulls up data to show where they got, which records they were reviewing to get their data. And in this case, they came back and said this property is worth $430,000 by the sales comparison approach, which is what lenders use to determine value. Now, you'll see cost approach, if developed. A lot of times cost approach is what would it cost to rebuild that house with labor and materials during that time. That's probably a better indicator for insurance companies to figure out how much to insure the property, but it's really not used, very rarely ever used by mortgage lending. Then you scroll down and the appraiser puts a bunch of notes in here. It says the subject's FEMA flood hazard data is considered reliable, that it's not in a flood zone. Seller concessions are 0 to 3% are normally paid in this market area. And there was a seller concession of $6,000 on this purchase. Cost approach to value, again, what would it cost to rebuild it? And the appraiser broke down how they came up to those numbers. Income approach to value was not included because it's not a rental. Project information for PUD, that stands for primary unit development, which means it's either single family homes that are managed by an HOA, or it's a townhome managed by an HOA. And then this is just boilerplate information about use and the intended scope and limitations and everything else. And then right here, the appraiser certification saying I certify and I agree that I did all of these things. We can pass through all that. And it has the name of the appraisal. And then they usually add another comparable here. And this is usually one that's listed, hasn't sold yet. These two. Market conditions, they break it down. In the prior 7 to 12 months, prior to 4 to 6 months, and current. It shows how many sales have closed, how many listings, how many months of supply, and it just gives lenders an idea if the area is stable, if it's declining or increasing. Then it shows that this was not listed on the multiple listing service. And it goes on, the appraisal report and identification. And then there's comments here about what the appraiser did and didn't do. And then it's got pictures of the subject property, gross living area, square footage of the lot. There's the back, the street. Then it shows interior pictures to make sure that the property isn't damaged, that it's in good condition. And then these are the comparable properties that were used to help justify the value of this property. And the layout of the property. And then it shows where the subject property is in relation to the comparable properties. So they can verify that these properties aren't really far away. This is a plat map. It shows where the property is located and how large the lot is. This is a flood map, and it shows that it's not in a special flood area. Then they provide median days on market, median price, sales trends, and there's some other great information. But this is what an appraiser has to do when they're appraising a property. They have to do a lot of research. They have to calculate all these numbers, and they have to verify that the home that's being purchased is worth the sales price. And if it's not, sometimes the appraisal comes in low, and if that happens, then the buyer and the seller may have to go back to the negotiating table. In some cases, the appraised value may come in higher than the purchase price. That's great too. It doesn't hurt anything. But that's what a uniform residential appraisal report looks like. That's what you would pay for. And this is what the lender needs to see to verify that the property is worth what somebody's buying it for.